Welcome to the Carrot and Stick Podcast, a podcast focused on helping sales managers and sales leaders to level up so they can have more impact in their role. Today, I'm having a conversation with Ollie Sharp, the VP of Sales at Abacum. But Ollie's a little bit more than just the VP Sales of Abacum. He also sits on our board here at OneUp and has been a fantastic advisor and consultant for us over the last 12 months. Prior to his role at Abacum and at OneUp Sales, he spent 10 years working at LinkedIn, 10 years working in the recruitment industry, and after those two roles was 3 years working at SalesLoft as their VP of Revenue before becoming their Managing Director, setting up their whole EMEA function, taking them from 0 to 8 figures in revenue inside 3 years, and building a wonderful team along the way. Ollie is just full of stories, of experience, of frameworks, of all kinds of lessons. And today we go back to the very, very basics. We start on what are the most common problems for first-time leaders. There's loads of stuff in here around how to hire, how to empower your team better, how to coach and lead rather than getting stuck in the detail and doing people's jobs for them, and some other stuff later on around giving time to actually be a leader and not filling your calendar from 9 to 5 every single day. We end out going a little bit through the MEDDIC framework and talking about how you can implicate a pain for your prospects to really convince them that your solution is the right way forwards. And we end up with a little bit of fun going through a couple of stories and a quick fire round. This one is absolutely packed with value. I barely get to talk throughout much of it because Ollie has just got so much wisdom to offer, and I'm sure you'll find it valuable. So without further ado, let's get into it. Ollie Sharp, VP of Sales at Abacum. Ollie, delightful to have you on. You and I have had so many conversations about many of the topics I think we're going to go through today anyway, but I think they're all really interesting things and it's worth kind of getting out. So we had a talk just before we came live, and there were 3 areas we want to dig into. First one is common problems for first-time leaders, which I think is so valuable that I think anyone watching it should find some value in there somewhere. Second one is hiring excellent salespeople, because I know that you run a pretty tight ship when it comes to hiring. And then the final one is a bit more specific around implicating pain through a qualification framework. All correct on your side? Happy with that?
Sounds good. Yep, definitely.
Perfect. Right, I'm going to hand the mic over to you because I've talked enough already. Let's go to you then. Common problems for first-time leaders. What do you think are common problems for first-time leaders that people need to be aware of?
I think if we set the scene, first of all, I think that a lot of companies promote their best salesperson into a leader. And I think that's not always the right thing to do. And some people sort of just feel that their next step should be leadership. But I think you really need to think about leadership because it's a completely different mindset. It's about everyone else, not yourself. You're no longer center of attention. So you've got to make sure that to be the best leader, you've got to think more about your team and everyone else than yourself. And if we look at the first time errors, and I can't speak for every first time error, I'm thinking of all the mess ups I did that when I went into leadership, I went into leadership, I was the top salesperson at LinkedIn, won global awards and stuff, and went into leadership. And my first thing was, I thought I knew best. I thought I knew the way to do everything. And it was typical. So I go in there thinking, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm the best at sales, so surely I'll be the best leader. Everyone should sell like me, and etc. And so that was the first mistake. And I didn't listen to people. I thought I knew the answer, so why did I need people's views and stuff? So didn't listen to people, didn't make sure people felt heard. All of these things that cause a problem with culture, basically. But the first team I ever built was very much just like me. Not bald northerners, but actually just similar to me in the way they thought and the background, etc. That there was no diversity of thought within that team, and it didn't work. So first common problem I think is building a team that you think is very similar to you or the people you already have. Then there's other things like I see a lot of first-time leaders where they are used to selling, but they want to keep involved in selling. Their job is a leader now, so it's about coaching and telling them how to sell better, rather than going in and closing the deal for them. And I think that's a massive common problem, that it's about pulling away a little bit. And how do you coach? How do you spend 10 minutes with somebody instead of an hour on the call to coach them to get that deal done? I think that it's, especially if someone's promoted from an AE, for example, into an AE manager role where they're managing their own team, the problems arise. And I get a lot of people coming to me asking this, how do I do that? Because one thing is you don't want people to go, oh, they've changed. But at the same time, you want to not be one of the team anymore. And there's sort of a professional distance that you've got to have. I mean, when I first went to leadership, I was probably the guy at midnight buying the tequilas, and I had to learn that I had to stop that, and I had to be the one going home at 11 o'clock and not being the one always in the middle of it. But to the professional distance side, but also it's about making those people accountable for their actions. And it's making sure that when the people you used to manage, that they do see a difference in you, but they know that you're on their side. You're there to help them, make them accountable. And accountability is a big one for me, because I think that you've got to help people understand what they need to do to be successful at their role, and you hold them accountable to those actions. You're there to coach them, help them go through problems, all these kind of things. And the final point I would say on this, actually, two more points. One is empowering your people. It's very easy as a manager to be, no, this is my idea, I'm going to do this. But when you mature as a manager, I prefer to get my AEs presenting on the all hands to talk about what we've done or what they've done, rather than me saying what this person's done, because I'm empowering them and getting them to train others. It empowers them and makes them realize that they're actually valued, rather than you taking everything away from them. And the final bit is make sure you put time aside so you can be a leader. And what I mean by that is, you probably as a leader now have to run team meetings, forecast calls, etc. And these to run a good meeting, you need to prepare for it. You need to research it. You need to think of the theme that you're going to talk about. The most inspiring meetings I've sat in are the ones where you can tell someone's told a story, and the leader has told a story that's relevant to the business, and they've taken time to prepare. So put some time aside, not just to plan, but to prepare for your meetings as well, and see it as your necessary time that actually helps you prepare to inspire your team, not just manage them.
Love that. I mean, there's 5 really key things that I've taken from that, which I've noted down. One is building a team that is similar to you or the other people you already have is kind of mistake number 1. Second one is not coaching and leading. You're getting involved in doing their job for them rather than guiding them through how to do it properly. Managing people that want your equal can be really hard. That kind of accountability and really letting them know you're on their side is important. Fourth one is not empowering people to do stuff, whether it's training, whether it's presenting, whether it's just getting involved in things that kind of are for the team and not just for the individual. Then that fifth one is not putting time aside to be a leader, which is a lesson I've learned a lot over the last year. Taking time to think things through and actually give yourself that headspace to be effective. Is that about right in your view?
100%. And I think that the first one is also one that we've talked about a lot as for One Up and stuff like that, about the diversity of thought within a team and the diversity of culture. And like we talked about it the other day, about the importance of when you're hiring somebody, it took me a while to realize that I was constantly thinking about culture fit and are they the same as everyone else? Now I don't look for that. I look for culture add, where they're different to everyone else, because it makes a big difference. And that's part of it.
Okay, and let's get tactical on that first point then. When you say you look for people that are culture add, that are different to what you've already got, where do you even get started for that? How do you look for it? How do you put aside biases that you might have already built in?
I think sometimes I look for similarities and then realize that they're not the right person if there's too many similarities, because rather than looking for something that's a difference, it's easier to find a similarity. So if I've got 2 people at final interview stage, one question I ask myself is, first of all, what skill does this person bring that we don't have in the team? And that's like, are they an Excel whiz? Are they brilliant at PowerPoint? Are they a great external speaker? What is it that they bring that is unique that no one else has that we can all learn from? And I think that's my starting point. And then when I think naturally as humans, our first natural reaction is, oh, they'll be a good fit. Because you warm to them and stuff.
It's familiarity, right?
100%. And after a little while, you start realizing that that's not necessarily a positive. Sometimes that's not the worst thing you can do for the team. Yeah, they're probably going to be a good fit. But what happens 3 more hires down the line when you start taking other people? They become outsiders. And it's so thinking like that. And I often just think, like, if I'm interviewing and I see somebody, and when we're just chatting, whether it's the personal stuff or whatever, I think, have I got someone else in the team like that? Have I got another person that with married with 2 kids that's traveled the world? No, I haven't. That's a different thing that no one has. Have I got somebody that is into gaming? No, I haven't. And it's just because We're all different.
We've got plenty of those here, Ollie.
I know. Plenty. All it is because when you build that first team, that cluster is really small, and not many people are different. But then when I built SalesLoft, I mean, Tom Boston and Jack Nico, completely different ends of the scale, doing the same job, but that's how I hired, and I'm doing it here again at Abacum. That you think of, okay, well, what's the whole range of people I could have? Let me take someone at this end and this end. And then it's filling in the middle, which is a lot easier than taking a cluster and then filling in the outside, because it just doesn't work as well. So the variety is important. Personality is as well. I mean, I always think, okay, well, actually they're different. They are maybe a little bit quieter. They're a little bit this, they're a little bit this. And that is in my view, it's the right way to hire.
How do you, I mean, let's take an example here where sales generally, wrongly or rightly, is often considered to be an extroverted role. You need to be a people person, you need to have a good conversation, you need to be engaging. If you're looking and saying, I want someone who's a bit quiet in personality because we haven't got that, and maybe this is, I'm picking out an example here that maybe isn't fair. I've heard plenty of introverted salespeople who are like the best at a company. They're not necessarily the loudest in the team, for example. But where do you stop with where there might be a conflict between the skill set and style of person that you need just for the sake of having someone different in your team?
The primary thing is they've got to be right for the role. You cannot take someone just because they are X, but they're not right for the role. You've got to go, they're right for the role. And it's normally when you've got more than one person, and I will normally I will work with a recruiter, an internal recruiter, and I'll say, actually, I don't have anyone that's a complete data wizard. I don't have anyone that is a cold calling wizard. I don't have this. Can we find someone with that? So it's quite intentional when you're hiring. But bottom line is they have to be right for the role. And then when it comes to decision making as who is best, then you tend to look at the skills you don't have.
Got it. And I'll tell you what, we've actually kind of had this as a second topic, but we've already sort of segued into it, which was the whole hiring excellent salespeople point. But here we are at point one still with common problems for first-time leaders, and we've kind of gone there. So we can still go a little bit deeper on this. Talk to me more a little bit about your hiring process as well. Where do you tend to look? Do you hire those that have got sales experience? You take those with none who you see potential in? What do you look for in that case? Just give me an overview of how Ollie Sharp does hiring.
So it depends on the timing. So at the moment, I'm building the first A's, the first SDRs, etc. in a team. When I'm building the first people in a team, I want specific experience. I want someone that comes in that I don't have to teach them how to SDR. I teach them how to SDR at Abacum. I teach an AE how to AE at Abacum. And I take those as the first ones. And then once you've built that, because you can build the processes and everything really well with those people, then I tend to open up. I'll never actually hire an AE externally that hasn't got at least a year's AE experience. I've in the past hired SDRs without it, and we've taken SDRs from recruitment backgrounds, from a variety of backgrounds. But AEs, I wouldn't take an SDR externally into an AE role. They've got to come and work for me for at least a year as an SDR to move up. So that's the first thing I think about. And once you've built the team, then the experience is less important. The way that I think about it, and a lot of companies, I think I like to hire on skills and personality and traits rather than specific experience. How I try to build, and I think some companies are too CV focused, must have worked for these 5 companies, and some companies are too open on it. Oh, just anyone with sales experience, and that is a hell of an investment in time in getting someone enabled. So I think when I think about it, I mean, there's certain characteristics that a lot of people talk about, that whether you're with John McMahon, Mark Roberge, a number of people talk about characteristics such as coachability, curiosity, intelligence, work ethic, and past success. Also looking at our company's values to make sure they align on those, but I try to build the hiring process around the characteristics. For example, when I do a role play, I try stop them, and then I will try coach them on something and jump back into role play and see how well they take it on that coaching. And if somebody doesn't get it or anything, I will try again. But I want to see that someone takes on coaching and is good at doing it. But that's part of it. Now, I try to actually break it down, because I didn't go to SalesLoft and go, I want someone selling sales tech or selling to sales leaders. I wanted someone selling business applications. I try and make the CV side as open as possible. but look for the connection. So I'm going, right, okay, business applications doesn't have to be sales tech. Selling to business decision makers doesn't have to sell to sales decision makers, but preferably not IT and finance. But then what I do is I think about, okay, someone that has to educate in when they're selling rather than someone that's selling a commodity is interesting because I'm taking something new to market. But then I look at the rhythm and I think about, okay, well, in these roles, they're probably going to be closing, I guess, around 4 to 6 new deals per month. So I want somebody that's closing at least 3 per month, up to 8 per month. And I want someone that's handling order values of between, I mean, our ACV was probably 14K, so it's probably an ACV of between 8K and 25K. So I think that rhythm is really important as to number of deals they're used to managing and how many deals they have to close to hit target. If I see someone that has to close 20 deals a month, each sort of like, okay, that's probably quite a commodity sell, and it's basically just knocking on doors to say, do you want it, sort of thing. And if someone's closing 3 deals a year, that's a big game hunter. That's not right for my role. So the rhythm
Makes total sense.
Yeah, the rhythm of it is very interesting and very important. And I think you've also got to look at the culture and the values. They've got to be aligned, but then the culture adds as well.
Spot on. Love that as well. And that's really all this before you even really started speaking to someone in many ways, because the CV part that you went through there was the real in-depth part, was really trying to understand what sits between the lines in a CV. And maybe even in some cases getting those extra questions like, what ACV are you selling? How many deals are you doing? And trying to make sure it fits your profile, which I love. Kind of going past the point of when you have hired someone then and you're onboarding them, what does a good onboarding ramp process for a salesperson look like? So I think we all know, some sales roles can take like a year to really get to full ramp and be delivering at the level that someone else who's been there for a long time will be doing as well. So how do you effectively ramp people?
As quickly as possible, really. I mean, at SalesLoft, we got a lot of people talked about how good our onboarding was. We trained them on the personas you sell to and everything. And I think a lot of companies, they will just say, this is what we do. This is our product. Here's your target market. Go sell it. And I think that, and I used to manage a team in recruitment. And I know that when I was in recruitment, if someone made a placement within the first couple of weeks, it wasn't always a positive thing because normally they bombed straight afterwards and it takes them to pull back up. So I always try to get the people that are joining to sort of take their time. What happens in my view is that if they actually rush the onboarding, they'll never learn it, because once they start selling, they'll never take a U-turn and start learning it again. They'll just learn it on the job and it takes longer. So I think that I'm trying to rebuild our onboarding at the moment, and it's things like understanding the market you're selling to, understanding the persona you're selling to, understanding the why of why our product actually exists. That's all very, very important. You can't assume that someone knows how to sell it, understanding the use cases, etc. I try to get my team to do the onboarding as well. They're all going to do a session for it. And I think it's just making sure that, to me, it's about not putting pressure on them. The pressure is just learn, take your time and learn, because it's the best investment you'll make. And my goal is for an AE, I mean, ours isn't the biggest ACV. It's around maybe 20, 25K ACV. So it's not large deals. And my goal is that they bring in 1 month's revenue within the first 3 months, and then they're fully ramped after that. So like 0, 25%, 75%. And I think that's realistic. I think that we can do that. And it's because we're actually investing time and effort into giving a good onboarding, and we're learning it. I mean, it's not there yet, but we will get there. But it is so important to get people set up properly, and also to know the tools. I remember some companies, you're not even taught how they use the CRM. Everyone uses each CRM completely differently, so they need to be taught how you use it. And every bit of tech they have, they need to be trained on. And I think it's that time investment that's needed.
I don't guarantee you there's probably someone who's listened to this at some point who will go, you're saying take your time, learn, so on and so forth. It's like, Ollie, we're hiring salespeople. They've got to be productive soon or we're in trouble, right? There's a reason why we're hiring them in, is to help us really increase velocity. So how do you find that balance between taking your time and learning and starting to deliver? In this case, like, for example, you said you give a target of 0 first month, 25 the next, 75 the next. At what balance do you start saying to them, right, now you need to start getting busy with your role and actually putting the shift in to start moving these deals forward and get some close in? How many weeks really do you say take your time to learn and start slow here?
I mean, just going back to that initial thing, I think that I would assume that if someone researched it and looked at individuals that have taken that we've invested time into on board, how much revenue they bring in their first year compared to someone that you rush to on board. Someone that you rush will probably bring in the first dollar quicker, but I don't think they'll bring in as much in their first year. So it's getting the right balance, as you say. I think that it's as long as you have a well structured onboarding, I believe that people should be starting to do outbound towards the end of their first month, beginning of their second month. And I think that if you're doing that, I mean, I've got two new starters. One of them's an AE, and he was starting to speak to companies in his third week. And I think that's okay as long as you're not putting pressure on them. And then they can start doing their outbound, because I should think with outbounding, really, you should be giving them a cadence or a sequence to use anyway, and they will be sort of giving them the recipe to do it. So I do think it's making sure you're not taking too long, but you're not rushing it. And it's hard to say. For enterprise selling, it's completely different, and it does depend on how complex everything is.
Got it. Love that. Okay, and then let's jump on to the second piece in our sort of common problems for first-time leaders then. The next piece was around not coaching and leading. It's trying to avoid getting involved in doing sales, which is what a lot of first-time leaders default to doing is, oh God, okay, I've been promoted. I was a top rep. Like, I should be involved in helping these things move because I know best.
Yep.
How does someone, I mean, maybe you got a story from when you first became a leader. How do you take that step back and make sure that you aren't overstepping your bounds and trying to do someone's job for them?
Yeah, it's. I had a bit of a realization, and it was actually quite selfish. My realization. It was a realization that I could act like the person just saying, "Do that with that deal, do that with that deal, do that with that deal," by running good deal reviews, etc. And it would stop me from running around literally handling 50 deals to actually handling none. And I used to have a manager that worked for me, and she won't mind me talking about this, Rebecca. She was a great salesperson. She was one of the top salesperson. She moved into leadership. She was reporting into me, and she was literally going to every client meeting. It was going in there, handling the client meeting, and that is, to me, you should just be joining at the right time, etc. So the biggest impact on her is there was a training course at LinkedIn called Managing that taught you about the power of coaching rather than training and doing stuff for them. And once you develop that as a skill, and what I mean by coaching, it's the way that LinkedIn defines it. It's more about helping them find the answer. It's not about, I mean, we talk about training versus coaching as different stuff and things. I see coaching as, okay, when the client said that, what else and you said this, what do you think happened, and what else do you think you could have said that could have had a bigger impact? Where do we want to go with this? And all you're doing is you're asking intelligent questions to get them to realize. Because I think the main reason why a sales leader, first-time sales leader, is in the sales is because they think, well, there's more chance of it closing if I'm there. However, if you keep doing it for them, you're going to keep doing it for a long time because they're not going to learn. So if you can be the one, when you coach, when you train, people do not actually, when you tell, people don't learn as quickly. If you coach and they find the answer, they learn quicker. So you should know the end where you want them to get to, but they should be the one finding that end point that you want. They'll learn quicker, and then you can set them free a lot easier. So keep involved at the right time. If it's a closing meeting, go along, etc. But to me, I think you can do better by spending more time being on top of your forecasts and your deals and doing deal reviews, and then understanding when you need to get in. Sales is a team sport, and Steve Goldberg at SalesLoft spoke a lot about this, and I fully agree with it, that when you do a deal review, if it's a big deal, then you go, right, who should we pull into this? I'll join that meeting. What can I do? But it's on the right deals at the right time, because you know what the input is, what's going to happen if you actually get involved. But it's just not being involved in every one. But it is a sign of maturing when you stop going on every meeting and trying to handle every deal and tell them what to do. Start coaching them.
If I was being, again, I'll play the devil's advocate and be the cynical manager here in a sense, right?
That's
and be
not
saying
like you,
to
Gary.
you, or ask, Not at all. Not me at all. Asking the question around saying, okay, look, it's all good saying sit there, ask questions, guide them to the answer. But if you know the answer, isn't it just easier to tell them the answer and help show them
No,
how to do it?
no, not at all. I mean, it's if you tell them how to do it, they'll make that mistake again and again and again. If you just say no, you should have done this, they will just know it for that time. If you coach them well and you say, okay, what I mean, coming out of a meeting, what do you think you could have done better in that? That's the first part. But okay, I think the client when they said this wanted X, Y, and Z. How do you feel you could have answered that have got what you want as well? Oh, we could have done this, but do you think that's doing that? So you're constantly asking questions, and that's how people learn. It gets stuck in their brain from doing it, and even though it's quicker in that moment to tell them, the total time invested in keep telling them is a false economy.
Love that. Very, very good. Love it. Third one then was managing people who are once your equal, and this, I can imagine this is a real headache. I know, for example, like, look, I've got a co-founder, for example, and that relationship over time has become much more about me managing him rather than just being like necessarily on the same level. Kind of natural for being a CEO, I guess, right? So yeah. I've somewhat felt this myself. I imagine you've seen it go with a lot of people. I imagine you probably had a similar experience at LinkedIn. Give us some stories around that. Give us some context around this as well. How have you helped people manage this better?
Well, I probably was a really good example of how not to do it, because I went in thinking I knew everything and didn't listen to people, and was probably the person they all went, oh, he's changed. Or maybe I was like that before as well. You never know. But I think
once a knob, always a knob is what I'm hearing there.
Exactly. But yeah, I think it's first of all, it's getting the balance, because you don't want to be at one end of the scale. You pull away from them and you act like that leader you always wanted to be, and you become like narcissistic and just overpowering to them. The more common one I see is that you're still stuck as one of them, and you don't. It's getting there. It's sort of pulling away and unsticking yourself, but you're still there to help them on the deals. You've got to show that you back them, that you empower them, but you're going to make them accountable at the same time. And you've got to show what you add to the team. I mean, you've hopefully been made the manager for a reason, and you've got something to add that you can help other people with. I see leadership as a partnership. If I'm leading someone, it's my job to work with them to make them successful. And I think that if you go into leadership and you think, right, well, I now can get people to do what I want them to do, it's the wrong thought. It's about how do I work and bring them along, develop everyone. So if you put development plans in place, if you help them with their deals, but you tell them what you expect of them and hold them accountable to that, then I think there's a nice gradual thing you can do that you can keep pulling away from them and not make the jump too quickly, but do make sure you are pulling away from them. And the one thing is you've got to, there's one of my old managers, Dan Dackham, had a very good saying, is what you permit, you promote. And I think it's a great saying. It's like if I'm sat in a meeting room and somebody comes out with a comment that I don't agree with, as in like a non-PC comment or something that is just the wrong thing to say in that environment, if I allow it as a leader, I'm promoting it. And it's very important, and it's very easy when you're one of the team, when you pull away from it, it's quite hard for you to say, actually, so-and-so, I don't think you should be using that language or I don't think you should be saying things like that in front of people, that you can stop it. And I think that is really important. Doesn't mean you can't go for a pint with that person straight afterwards and be fine with them, but you've got to sort of stick up for the right things, and they also sticking up for your company values and culture to say, actually, that doesn't align with our values. You've got to stop doing that in front of people or on the one-to-one basis.
I was going to say, yeah, there must be some kind of framework or something you tie it to rather than just, I don't think you should say that. And I think company values are always a really solid one to be able to refer back to, right? Or at the very least, some kind of understanding of how the company is going to operate if your values maybe don't cover that sort of thing. But you covered it off there at the end really nicely. The values, I think is the right way to do
it. Values are brilliant to have. And at LinkedIn, the values were very prominent, but there were also, if you're going to have your culture and values should sort of be a guidance as to how you act and what you do. And the decisions you make. But often, if I was going into a tough conversation with somebody in my organization, if I can pull it back to a value, there's no arguing with it. There's nothing to say, well, I think it's all right. Well, no, the company value says this, so that's why it's not aligned with that. And as a leader, the quicker you learn that, the better. I think it gives you a quick jump into being a good leader.
Yeah, I mean, I love that we have like a catch-all one here. Like, you may have heard it before. Like, don't be a dickhead is our catch-all value for just don't be a shit at work. If you're rude, if you're egotistical, if you act selfishly, you can just point straight at that value and say being a dickhead. And it's very easy to be able to block it off, right? So I completely agree. Values are so good for that. I mean, thankfully, we don't really have to reference it, but it is there in case we do need it, right? Which I love. Cool. The other one then is, I love this one actually, around empowering people to do stuff. And this is empowering people that are in your team, not just the managers, for example. It's actually letting people contribute to the team. It's almost like playing on that purpose of being greater than just yourself. You're also now playing towards the team as well. So can you give some examples around that, around how you've had salespeople that have reported to you, how you've given them more responsibility than maybe a salesperson would normally have to empower them and help them grow and develop?
Yeah, I think it goes down to a really basic level as well. And empowering is just, someone feels empowered even if you ask for their view. That if you're trying to find a solution to a problem and you say, "So what's your thoughts on this? I'd really value what you think," you're empowering them even in doing that. So I think that's a starting point. I think that it's recognizing people for what they're good at and empowering them to, whether it's talking on an all hands, whether it's presenting at your own team meeting, whether it's training somebody else. I mean, you could say it's just lazy management because you're getting everyone else to do your work for you, but at the same time, it's not. You are delegating, and I think there's a difference between empowering and delegating. I know there's a very big difference, but sometimes delegating and empowering others can be seen as delegating, and the empowerment is the feeling that person gets. Delegating is what you're actually doing, but you're delegating for the right reason. So by saying to my SDR, can you help me and train all the new starters on how you're handling cadences and how you're running them through and how you're doing your outbound stuff? Can you train them on that, or can you do a session in my next team meeting? Yes, I could do that. And yes, I'm sort of delegating it, but I'm doing it to help that person gain the confidence and actually feel like I appreciate what they do and I think that they're good. So there's lots of ways I think we should do it, but it's just giving them the chance to shine. And I think that helps, that empowers them and makes them feel in that way that they are valued and they're doing a good job. I mean, if someone's not performing and they're on a pip, don't get them to do something, because you're setting the wrong example. Get it from your best performers and find out what their superpower is and get them to share that with others. And that's what I think we should be doing.
It's kind of putting your ego to one side and acknowledging that maybe there are others in your team that are stronger at certain areas than you are as well, right? It's not like because you're a manager, you are de facto the best at every single element of every single role that you then therefore manage, right? It's not that straightforward and simple.
100%. And I think that also it's like, if while I was at LinkedIn, if they said to me, okay, can you stand on stage and talk about what you and your team did with X? If I get one of my team to do it, as a manager, you're sort of going, oh, I'd love to stand on stage and I'd love to be telling it. I'll get all the glory. The way you've got to think about it as a manager is, well, I'm still getting the glory because people know that person's in my team. It's my team and it's like having your child on stage at an awards thing. It's feeling proud of them because they're your team now. So I think I would much rather than take the limelight, just make sure that I'm giving my team the limelight, the ones that deserve it, because it's empowering them. And I will hopefully be a better leader to them. But part of me inside goes, oh, they're in my team. That's good. I've still won.
It was all warm and fuzzy. Oh, you've got a heart, Ollie. Go figure.
It's somewhere in there.
It's somewhere. I really like how at the very start as well, like the main easiest bit of advice anyone could take away and start using today is just ask for opinions, right? Or just, hey, I need to communicate this to the team as well. I want your opinion on how we could best put this forward to people. It just shows that you trust them and that you do value their opinion. And I think, like you said, like I know in our team, a number of times I've asked people that aren't like even in my team, in the leadership team, for their thoughts on things. And although there's a level there of how much they need to know, there's also that value and also getting their opinion, having their contribution towards something that you're thinking about, which is really good. So I'm totally with that.
Yeah, I think even the first session I did with you guys when we were over in Portugal where I did it with the AEs and I said, right, if we want to get to X, how do we do that? And all you're doing is
Yeah.
you're getting everyone in the same boat, so to speak. You go, right, we're paddling there, but how do we get there? And as soon as people come up with their
Yeah.
own ideas and they feel that it's their idea, then they're more likely to be trying to go for it.
Spot on. Absolutely love that. On to our last first-time leader problem then, which was not putting time aside to be a leader. This is probably my latest learning, I think, over the last year, is giving yourself enough time to put real thought into things, and sometimes having free time where there is, dare I say, nothing to do. It feels very weird putting nothing in and saying this time is just thinking time. It does feel very strange. But that time to really invest quality time in making sure things are done properly is 100% super valuable. So what, again, examples have you got around this? How do you encourage your team to think about this?
So I think for me, when I started, I was just going from one meeting to another. And Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn, always said that he always had, for leaders, he always suggests you have 1 or 2 1-hour sessions a week for just thinking. And it's where you get your head in order. But on top of that, I think it's about preparing for meetings. So for me, if I'm preparing to do a talk in any way in regards to an internal team meeting or anything like that, I put time into it. And especially, I tend to do bigger quarterly ones that have got more of a theme, or end of a month one. And I'll think about what that needs to be. So like we talked about Roger Bannister and the first 4-minute mile, etc. So my managers that I've had working underneath me with me before, when we come to a quarterly review or anything like that, I'll regularly say, okay, what's the theme and what are you preparing for it? And I will work with them to prepare that. And we'll sit down and brainstorm ideas. Okay, well, it's the theme of we've got to smash this. Okay, well, what are the ideas you can come up with? What stories can you tell? And I will work with them on it to make sure they're putting the time aside to actually, when it comes to the day when they're talking about it, they've got a story to tell or whatever it is. But I think that it's just putting that time aside and realizing, inspiring a team, I believe, and I'm still not there as to where I want to be in inspiring a team, but I believe it's a bit of a cheat, because really what you're doing is you're inspiring. It's one to many, and it's literally, you could sit in a room of 10 and you inspire those people for half an hour. That's a better time investment than it is by spending an hour with each person individually, as long as you put the time investment into it. So I think that making sure, and inspiration is a funny one, and think that there's the grey area between inspiration and motivation. Inspiration is something that we can't explain. Motivation is money, something like that actually, I'm going to motivate you by giving money, etc. But it's making sure that we can inspire ours. And I think one thing that becomes inspiring is someone that is with value as well, and it always portrays the right values and knows your values. I would advise any leader to sit down and list their own values. What are your values that you stick by and you make your decisions, not your company values? But yeah, that's a lot around putting time aside to inspire.
Really like that one as well. We could dig into that one loads, but I'm also a little bit conscious of time. Our second point was going to be around hiring excellent people, but we've already gone into that as our first point. So what we'll actually do is jump into that third one, if you like. And this one I love, because context for me coming into recording today's podcast is I've been speaking to a few founders this week around, at the start of their decks, they put before investors to try and raise all these millions of dollars they want to raise, is a really clear pain of what it is you're trying to sort of solve in the world, and ultimately inspiring someone to take action to give you money. And sales is exactly the same, right? It's about building up a pain in the prospect's mind and helping them really understand just how painful something is, so they have to act to try and solve it. And I know you're really hot on the MEDDIC framework. You love qualification frameworks and all that kind of good stuff. And you spoke about wanting to build a pain that you can then implicate with the prospect. So give us your overview on that, and we'll have a good talk through it afterwards.
So my overview on it is, I think a lot of companies, they look for a use case to sell to, okay, rather than a pain. So do you have this? Do you have does it integrate, etc.? Brilliant, I'll try sell to you. That's not a reason why somebody buys. What you've got to do is find the pain point. And as John McMahon, who put MEDDIC together with a few others, he talks about that lots of salespeople will actually find the pain, but the next step from finding the pain is quantifying it. Say, okay, how much is that hurting you, etc. Then hardly any at all will actually go for being able to implicate the pain. So if you can't quantify it and say how much that pain is worth to that company, you can't put a price point on what you're doing. Okay. But if you can't implicate it, you're not creating the urgency. So if you're saying, well, the pain that you have is X, and that means if you don't solve this, it's going to cost you another 500K every year until you solve it. That's fine because you're talking about the price point. But if you're saying, but your revenues are projected to go by X over the next few months, few quarters, and with that 500K, you're not going to hit your next round of investment. What's going to happen to your business? Well, we may not get the next round of investment. That's creating the urgency, and that's the level of implication. The way that I see it is you're sort of going up a pyramid a little bit, that you're speaking on this level. And there's a book called Selling Above and Below the Line. Below the line is operational, above the line is strategic. So when someone says, this is our problem, you've got to keep going up and up and up. So you're going, okay, how does that impact your boss? How does that impact the board? And does that stop them from getting to their next goal? Eventually you'll find the pain that you can implicate that means that the company has to take it. Normally the economic buyer is higher than the person you're talking about anyway. So the importance of it, lots of people will tick the pain box, go, yeah, we've got pain. Have they got it to implicate, quantify, then implicate that they can have a price point and create urgency? No. And that's where the biggest problem I see lies.
So, I mean, taking that back to kind of square one, then if someone says I've got a pain, it's more like they know they've got it, but they don't know exactly how big it is. It feels like it's worth talking about, which is ultimately why you're having a conversation. But then let's use an example. You can pick LinkedIn, SalesLoft, Abacum, a random company, entirely up to you. How would you go about quantifying a pain then in one of those company situations? Maybe take us through a real life example.
So, for example, when you're at SalesLoft, you're helping salespeople to be more efficient. So they're saying to the person you're talking to, they may be saying the sales team aren't doing enough outbounding, and we're spending so much time on admin tasks that we're not doing well. Okay, that's not the pain. That's sort of what's the current situation. What's happening because of that? We're not hitting targets. So the average team is hitting 70% of target. Okay, so we found a pain because this person cares 70% of target. So 70% of target, if that's across the business, how much is that across the business? Is the average across the business 70%? Yes. What's your current ARR per quarter? It's 2 million. Okay, so at the moment, really, your target is 2 million. So really, you're every quarter, you're losing 600K of revenue because there's the 30% you're missing. Yes. Okay. So if that continues, what happens to the business? Because I'm assuming you've set your goal to align with something in the future. Yeah, well, we need to hit these projections for us to hit our next series or to whatever, to expand into the US, to invest in product. So basically what you're saying is if you don't solve this, then you won't be able to invest in the product and you may lose your number one slot, which will mean X, Y, and Z to the business and the board. Is that right? Yes. So there you've got more of a time frame. Okay, you need to do it quickly because of you're going to lose your number one slot or you're not going to get the Series B funding, etc. So all we've done is we've taken this initial conversation up the chain a few times to get to the stage where we actually see how much it impacts the business, and if it's not solved, why they need to do something soon.
I love that. And I think I know exactly what the answer to this is going to be, is then drawing it back to almost your solution that you're looking to sell. Are you going in there and saying, look, we can fix that. We can get you an extra 600K an ARR every single quarter. That's what our product does. How do you then make that believable? I'm aware this is going away from implicating a pain as such, but it's more now expanding on, okay, how do you convince them you're then the right company to solve it?
I think that first of all, it's not a case of we can find that 600K. It's what you're trying to do is get them make the link between, okay, because your team aren't doing the outbound stuff that they need to, they're not hitting target, which means, and you keep going up the chain, we can help you increase your outbound by X%. Okay, so it's sort of the problem is as soon as you start going, we can find you 600K. It's like, okay, you're guaranteeing you can find me 600K. So you got to be careful with that. I think once you've done that, then you can try to understand the decision criteria of what they're looking for. Andy White, who wrote the Medic book, is fantastic. talks regularly about if you can actually help build the decision criteria for the customer. And I think that's a really good point, because a lot of buyers aren't that experienced. So if you can actually go, yep, this is why it's important, so let's look at what you need. And then you start building decision criteria. And guess what? You're going to build that decision criteria around all of your strengths. And then you're going to be the first one, the best ones to solve their problems.
I see. Love that as well. And in a sense, it is, like you say, sort of helping them lead them towards that. And that initial point around not promising the 600K and saying, look, we can give you an increase in outbound of X%, for example. It doesn't guarantee that you'll get the 600K in ARR. And you never want to commit yourself towards that kind of promise, because you just don't know, can you have an impact that deep all the way up? And if you are that kind of product, everyone should be buying your product at the end of the day. If you can have that guaranteed impact to get someone that missing amount of target they've got, for example. How do you how do you hold back on the commitment from it in a way? You're saying increase your outbound by that, and they're going, okay, then how do you help show them how that could lead to the outcome they're after to solve that grand pain without committing to fixing it?
I mean, if I can get someone to say, okay, so really what we're saying is they're currently hitting 70%. So I'm assuming that if we can actually increase your outbound capacity by another 40%, then we can hit that. Logic tells us if we can increase by 40%, we can actually get you to the 100%. Does that make sense to you? Yes. Okay. So we can we can take all of this admin part away from you, and that will increase your outbound as long as they're using it right. And that will get them to target if that's logic with you. Yes, it is. So can you now see how if you do this, it can help you achieve that and you hit your Series B? Yes. So it's very much taking it back to the granular level of what our tool can do that you started at to align it back.
Got it. Love it. Really helpful stuff. And we've gone a little bit further than like building a pain that you can implicate. But I think those next 2 or 3 steps are all really valuable. By the sounds of it, though, if people want to learn more, it sounds like the answer is get Andy White's book on Medic.
Yes. Yeah. My favorite sales book is Andy White.
It's your Bible.
White, spelled with WHYTE. That'd be my first book to read, and then once you've read that, read The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon, and it's brilliant. It puts it all into perspective about him, how he consults with a few companies and how he advises them, and it's sort of your book 2 of the Medic framework. Those books will teach you a hell of a lot.
Really interesting you say that. Last guest I spoke to on our last podcast, Richard Smith from Allego, I asked him what his favorite book was. Qualified Sales Leader.
Brilliant. It was such a good book.
So I think it'd be unfair of me to ask what your favorite book is here as part of the quickfire round, because you've already gone off a whole lot about the 2 Medic books. So what's your favorite book then that isn't either the Medic book or the Qualified Sales Leader?
There's a long list. The one that I love is The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. I love that book. And also, I'm going to go with 2, 3. Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, brilliant book. It's a fable, and just read it if you haven't read it. The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker, that teaches us that most people that think that successful people are happy, but actually science proves that happy people are successful. And then the other one is Mindset by Carol Dweck, which looks at a growth mindset and does lots of tests and very scientific. And if you have kids, there is one by Matt Syed called You're Awesome that looks at Carol Dweck's book, and it's one that you should read for kids of around 8 to 12. So get You're Awesome if you have kids. But those are my 3 books.
Like it. Who are your favourite LinkedIn influencers to follow? Whose content do you get the most value from?
I don't think anyone can argue with this. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's Tom Boston. I mean, who can beat Tom Boston when it comes to LinkedIn? He
is one of a kind.
He's an absolute legend. And I remember when he turned up for his interview at SalesLoft, he turned up in a suit, and I was in a hoodie, and I went, "What the fuck are you wearing?" And he went, "Oh, it's my wedding suit." He said, "I've even got my wedding shoes on. Haven't worn them since I got married."
Bless him.
And we had a really
I love him because, like, although the content is always designed to be really like educational and that sort of thing, his just makes me laugh. I have to watch every video that he posts. I know it's just guaranteed to be brilliant.
He is such a nice bloke as well. I was lucky enough to work with him for a long time, and he's brilliant, and he is the best influencer. Even my mates that aren't in sales WhatsApp me about him and go, "His latest video is brilliant." And so, yeah, Tom Boston's got to be hands down.
I need to get him on the podcast at some point. He'd have a real good few stories to tell, I'm sure, and plenty of tips, which I'm sure everyone would appreciate. This next one is around 3 tips then. 1 tip, what's your top tip for an aspiring manager? a top tip for a current manager, and your top tip for a sales leader. And I will
I've
repeat
already
those if
told
you
you
need
my
me to.
memory's bad. Ask me one question at a time. So top tip for
Top tip
let's
for
go one at a time.
aspiring managers.
Aspiring managers.
Yes.
Take time and think about the role you're doing, that you actually don't get swept away in it. Plan for your meetings, plan time to be inspirational, and plan everything, and just go with an operating rhythm that works, and put time aside to make sure you're doing the best job you can for yourself. Don't get tied up where you've got back-to-back meetings all day, every day.
Like it. And that's for aspiring managers, not those that are there yet, right?
Oh, sorry, aspiring managers. I thought you meant a manager that wants to get even better.
That sounded like for current managers. So let's do it back to front. That was the current managers tip then. Good tip.
Let's cut that out.
Let's do aspiring. Those that are like successful salespeople who want to be managers one day, what would you say to them as a top tip?
Okay, make sure you want to go to management. It's not, everybody thinks it's just the next step. It's like SDRs thinking they've got to go to AE next. Make sure you want to go to management. It's sales. You can be, I'm not saying salespeople are selfish, but you can be selfish in sales. You can look after number one. You can look after yourself. Management is nothing like that whatsoever. I think when I realized I was interested in management is when I helped set up other offices at LinkedIn and help train other teams. And I started getting more from helping other teams and seeing them successful than my own success. And that taught me that I was ready for management. And before that, I don't think I was.
Got it. And then your top tip for sales leaders.
Didn't ask that at the beginning.
I asked managers was my first one. Top tip for current managers. This one's for sales leaders. So those that are in a much higher, more strategical level of management.
Oh, okay. All right. Leaders and managers. Okay. Top tip for sales leaders.
I should really differentiate between those better, but I will do that in future.
My top tip for sales leaders is to look. What I try to do when I'm managing other leaders is have some sort of KPIs that are more leading indicators and that lead towards the lagging indicators, obviously. And how I structure a framework is with each person, I have 2 to 3 leading indicators, normally one really leading and one mid process. So, for example, an SDR would be day one cadences and then no overdue tasks and stuff like that. But I build a framework that we know exactly what we're tracking, the leading and lagging indicators, and then if they're not hitting it, we know what further KPIs to look at, and it becomes quite scientific. So that's what I would say. Just make sure that you've got those, and again, a good operating rhythm, that you've got all your weekly, quarterly meetings put in your diary that you stick to.
Love it. Nice. And then last question. This is a bonus one. I didn't ask this one earlier on. Favorite tool in your tech stack?
Do you know what? I've been playing around with a tool called SalesLoft recently. I didn't use it when I was at SalesLoft.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
I started learning it when I left SalesLoft. I think that throughout my time in sales, I think my favorite tool in my tech stack has always been the CRM. And I know it's quite controversial because no one likes the CRM, but I do. As a salesperson, I used it to run my day. I used tasks. I used it religiously. As a sales leader, I learned to build reports and dashboards. And I make my team use it all the time to put everything in. And I think if you're doing that, it becomes the core of your business. So although I think sales engagement, Sixth Sense, SalesLoft, all these are brilliant, I do think that the CRM is cool.
Plenty of CRM providers out there now. Like, thank you so much, Ollie. Real shout out for them. Lovely. Exactly. To wrap things up then, any shout outs from your side? Anything kind of you like would draw people's attention to? Tell us a little bit about Abacum maybe. And then if people wanted to find you, what's the best way to do it? LinkedIn, I imagine?
Yeah, LinkedIn. Abacum, we're an FP&A tool, so we are hiring. We've recently, I joined them 4 months ago, and I've been hiring AEs, SDRs, SEs, and still will continue to hire. My goal is I want one last job, and this is my one last job that I take to IPO. So there's a lot of growth to come, hopefully. Find me on LinkedIn, and that's it. And shout outs, not massive. I mean, there's too many people. I learned very early days that I think that I can be my best if I know who I can go to for mentorship for all different things. So there's a lot of people I reach out to for many questions. So it's hard to do the shout outs because I don't have a mentor. I have a number of people that can mentor me. But yeah, that's it.
There you go. Ollie, thank you so much. Really appreciate the talk and some really interesting topics today that I'm sure people will find valuable, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Let's hope so. Thank you, Derry.